Welcome to dark history for sleep, where the past isn't just remembered, it locks the door behind you. Tonight you aren't a criminal, you aren't sick. But that won't matter, because it's the 1800s, and someone has decided you don't belong in the outside world anymore. Maybe you're a wife who talks back, a woman who grieves too long, a man who lost his job and drinks too much, or a child. Yes, even a child who doesn't follow instructions. None of these are crimes, but today they are symptoms of insanity. And in this world, that's all it takes. You don't need a trial. You don't even need a formal diagnosis. You just need a signature. Sometimes from your husband, sometimes from your father, sometimes from a stranger who finds you inconvenient. And once that paper is signed, you're gone. The carriage arrives early. You're told to pack nothing. A man in a black coat waits silently at the door. You protest, you plead, you say you're fine. But it doesn't matter, because the moment that gate shuts behind you, you are no longer a person, you are a patient. You arrive at the institution, not a hospital. Not really. A brick fortress, a former mansion, a converted prison. Some have gardens to impress visiting donors. Others are falling apart before you even walk in. The moment you enter, you are stripped of your name, of your clothes, of your story. You are bathed by force, examined by someone who doesn't speak to you, and led down a hallway that never seems to end. It smells like urine and bleach, and something worse, something you can't identify. You hear the screaming before you see the rooms, and then you are given a bed, wooden frame, no sheets, one blanket, one tin bowl. And the rules: don't speak unless spoken to, no sudden movements, no visitors unless approved, no escape, ever. Your diagnosis, that's not up to you. It might be female hysteria. It might be moral insanity. It might be mania without delirium. It might just say unruly. But from now on, it's your identity, and no one is coming to help you. The doors don't lock loudly. They don't have to. It's the silence that tells you you're trapped. The ward smells of damp wood, iron, and old sweat. The windows are barred, but the glass is so clouded you can't see outside. Light comes in dim and sour. There are no clocks, no mirrors, no personal items. Time here doesn't pass. It folds. You're shown your cot, row after row of identical beds, some occupied, some not. The other patients glance at you or don't. Their faces are hollowed, teeth missing, hands trembling. Some rock back and forth. Some whisper to no one. Some just stare. You ask what to do. The attendant doesn't answer. There's no orientation, no explanation. You're expected to understand by osmosis, through punishment, or through imitation. You notice quickly that talking is dangerous. Ask too many questions and you'll be labeled disruptive. Cry and you're hysterical. Refuse your food and you're non-compliant. Even silence can be suspicious, interpreted as catatonia, withdrawal, or obstinance. You're no longer allowed to have a bad day. Every emotion is evidence. Meals arrive twice a day. Watery soup, a crust of bread, sometimes moldy. You eat with a tin spoon chained to the table. You are watched, timed, and scolded if you speak during meals. There is no privacy, not for eating, not for bathing, not for using the toilet. There are no locks, no curtains, no doors you can close. At night the lights dim, not off, never off, just low enough to hide things in the shadows. You hear weeping from the far beds, a sudden laugh, then screaming, then nothing. An attendant walks the aisle with a stick in hand, not to beat, not yet, just to tap the walls, tap the metal beds, tap your frame as he passes. Reminder, you do not sleep well. No one does, because there's something worse than the howling. It's the quiet that follows it. You were never dangerous, but now you're learning what happens to those who disobey. The rules are unwritten but absolute. Speak too loud, punishment. Cry too long, punishment. Refuse to follow instructions, punishment. Even standing in the wrong place at the wrong time can mark you as unmanageable. And the punishments are not warnings, they're lessons. First comes the isolation, a narrow room, no window, bare floor, sometimes straw. Often nothing. You are locked inside for hours, days, in some places, weeks. No one speaks to you, no one checks on you unless you scream, and screaming only extends your time. Next is the camisole, a form of early restraint, a canvas shirt with sleeves sewn shut and tied behind your back. It pulls your arms into an unnatural cross. If you fight, they tie the straps tighter. If you cry, they ignore you. You may be left in it for hours, sweating, choking, unable to lie down. Others are tied to chairs, to walls, to beds. One woman across from you hasn't moved in 2 days. She stares at the ceiling, blinking just once every few minutes. You don't know her name. No one does. Her record just says, unresponsive. Then comes the wet sheet. It's described as a calming treatment, but you know better. You're stripped naked, soaked in freezing water, and wrapped tightly in cold, wet linen until your arms and legs are bound like rope. They leave you on a table, shivering, your skin burning from chill. The attendants say it's for your nerves, but it feels like punishment for being human. After the sheet, you return to your bed. You are quiet now, not healed, just scared. And that, they say, is progress. You begin to notice who survives in here and how. The ones who smile too much, nod politely, keep their voices low. They aren't happy. They're performing sanity, pretending to be cured, hoping someone will believe it. You try it, too. You fold your blanket neatly. You say thank you at meals. You stop asking when you can go home, because now you know. No one here gets out for being sane. They get out for being invisible. Not all patients are treated the same. There's a hierarchy here, one that has nothing to do with diagnosis and everything to do with status. The quiet women, the ones committed for melancholia or female hysteria, are often ignored, left to rot slowly in back wards or sewing rooms. The poor are beaten, the disabled are mocked, and those deemed dangerous, whether for violence or resistance, are made into examples. You hear them before you see them. There's one man down the hall, restrained to a wall by iron cuffs. He screams into the night. Not words, just sound, an animal sound. The staff tell you he once tried to fight back when they took his coat. Now he doesn't even blink. There's another woman, young, maybe 18. Her record says unruly, delusional, sexually erratic. You're not sure what any of that means, but the attendants keep her heavily sedated. Her hands are tied at all times. She sits slumped in a chair, drooling. At night, you hear someone visit her room. You try not to listen. You've already learned that some abuse here doesn't come from madness. It comes from uniforms. There are wards where patients are kept like animals, naked, chained, sleeping on stone floors. The staff refer to them with nicknames, not names. Scratcher, whiner, beast. They're called subhuman, unfit, and treated accordingly. But perhaps the worst thing is that no one from the outside world knows or believes. Family visits are rare. If they come, the patient is cleaned up, coached, and observed. Any mention of mistreatment is dismissed as delusion, Letters are censored or discarded, complaints ignored. One woman you meet had tried for 5 years to convince the staff she was sane. She spoke clearly, kept her room spotless, quoted scripture, made no enemies. She was moved to a new ward last month for being manipulative. Now she doesn't speak at all. You begin to understand that this place isn't designed to help you. It's designed to keep you, as long as it wants to, as long as it can. Some patients lose their minds, others lose their hope. But the ones who suffer the most are those who hold on to both. Because the asylum has a trick crueler than any restraint. It lets you believe you might leave. You're told there's a review process, that if you behave, if you follow orders, if your symptoms improve, you'll be reevaluated. You'll be eligible for transfer, for parole, maybe even release. You start trying harder, smiling more, nodding when staff speak, agreeing even when it hurts. You endure the indignities, bathing in cold water with strangers watching, being force-fed after skipping a meal, standing still for hours during mandatory posture drills, and one day, your name appears on a list. You're told to prepare, to dress neatly, to present yourself for inspection by the superintendent. You don't sleep the night before. You imagine going home. You imagine someone saying your name kindly. You imagine sunlight that doesn't come through bars. The next morning, you stand in line with others, your file held in someone else's hands. A man you've never met reads a summary of your progress. He doesn't speak to you. He doesn't ask questions. He checks a box. You are escorted back to your ward. No explanation, no conversation, no release. The next person on the list? Gone. You hear she went to a farm, or another asylum, or maybe she left for good. You don't know. The staff won't say. The patients won't ask. Everyone learns. Hope is not a reward. It is a test. And failing that test means something worse than punishment. It means they stop watching you. You're no longer a threat. You're not a patient. You're just part of the furniture now. And somehow, that feels worse than being punished. Because at least pain means they think you still matter. Some people died in these places, but many were simply forgotten. You start to notice their faces, silent figures tucked in corners, untouched, unspoken to. Their names aren't listed on the daily rosters. Their records are incomplete. They don't receive visitors. No one mentions their past, and they never leave. There's one man who spends every day sitting by a window that doesn't open. He whispers to himself. His shoes are 2 sizes too big. You ask an attendant who he is. The reply is simple. He's always been here. But no one's always been here. Someone committed him. Someone signed that paper. Someone stopped coming. And that's how it happens. Family moves away. A husband remarries. A child grows up and is told, "Your mother died young." The asylum doesn't remind them, doesn't follow up, doesn't ask. If the patient is quiet, compliant, they're placed in long-term care, and long-term often means permanent. There are patients who arrived at age 20 and died at 80, never once leaving the grounds, not because they were violent, not because they were dangerous, but because they had nowhere else to go, and no one left to ask. Sometimes a grave is marked. Sometimes not even that. In older asylums, the burial plots sit behind the main buildings, rows of worn stones or wooden stakes, many unlabeled. Unknown female. Patient 3942. Just numbers in a ledger rotting in the earth. If your name isn't spoken, your story isn't told. And that's what the asylum does best. Not kill, not cure, but erase. You feel it happening to you, slowly, your old life fading, your voice shrinking, your memories twisting in the noise of other people's madness. You start to forget what day it is, then what season, then how long you've been here. Eventually, you stop wondering if you'll get out. You start wondering if anyone remembers you ever weren't here. The asylum has a schedule. They call it structure. You learn to call it survival. Wake up before dawn, cold wash basin, no soap. Breakfast, oatmeal if you're lucky, burnt broth if you're not. You eat in silence, shoulder to shoulder with people you fear, and people who fear you. After breakfast, it's labor. The institution doesn't just hold people, it uses them. Patients are sorted, strong ones to the laundry, weak ones to the gardens, others to cleaning. You scrub the floors on your knees while an attendant watches. You're told this is therapeutic. That work builds character, but it doesn't build anything. It just keeps you busy. In the afternoons, there's recreation. A cruel word. Sometimes it's mending clothes. Sometimes it's walking in circles in the courtyard under watchful eyes. Sometimes it's sewing until your fingers bleed. For the violent or nonverbal, recreation is a padded cell or a wooden chair with straps. There is no music, no laughter, no books, unless you're deemed safe enough to read. And most aren't. What passes for therapy is worse. Once a week, a doctor makes rounds. He speaks to you for 3 minutes. He doesn't ask questions. He makes notes. Occasionally, he taps your knee with a reflex hammer or shines a light in your eyes. Then he moves on. You don't know his name. He doesn't remember yours. If you cry, they say you're regressing. If you smile, they say you're masking. If you're silent, they say you're deteriorating. There is no right way to be, and always, always, you are watched, not just by staff, but by other patients. Some are rewarded for reporting behavior. Some are unstable enough to turn violent without warning. There are no locks on your dorm door. There is no privacy. There is no safety. The only place you're ever alone is inside your own mind. And even that won't last forever. They call it treatment. But it feels like a slow execution, one that keeps you breathing just long enough to repeat the cycle. You're told these methods are based in science, that they're progressive, modern, kind even. But when the door closes and the orderlies lift your arms, the kindness vanishes. One method is called the rotating chair, designed by doctors who believed insanity could be shaken out of the mind. You're strapped into a wooden device that spins faster and faster until your vision blurs and you vomit. Sometimes you pass out. Sometimes you wake up with your head in your lap and no memory of where you are. This is not an accident. It's a data point. Then comes the cold bath, not for cleanliness but for compliance. You're submerged in icy water, held down by force, and left until your skin turns blue. They say it reduces agitation. What it reduces is resistance. Another day they try the shower treatment, a high-pressure blast of freezing water directed at your chest and back. You're told to breathe deeply. You try, but your ribs lock up and your legs go numb. Afterward, you're left in wet clothes for hours. No blanket, no towel, no warmth. Just the belief that suffering purifies the mind. Some doctors experiment with blistering, using chemicals or heat to raise large boils on the skin. They believe the pain redirects energy away from the brain. You see a woman in your ward with her back covered in raw, open sores. She no longer speaks. No one asks why. No one dares. There are more, endless more, purgatives, bloodletting, electric shocks, all wrapped in the language of science. And the cruelest part, there's no explanation. You're not told why it's happening, only that it will keep happening until you improve. And what does improvement look like? Stillness, silence, compliance, a kind of death that doesn't stop the heart. Night is when the rules change. During the day, the asylum pretends to be structured, regulated, medical. At night, it becomes something else. The halls are quieter, but never silent. You hear muttering, whimpering, the rustle of sheets, and sometimes, suddenly, screaming. There are fewer attendants now. Most stay close to the nurses' quarters or smoking rooms, unless they're making rounds or making someone disappear. You've noticed which beds attract visits, which patients are kept in private cells, which doors lock from the outside. One woman was taken from the ward 2 nights ago. You heard her protest, then cry, then nothing. The next morning she returned with bruises on her arms and a vacant look in her eyes. No one asked what happened. No one needed to. Because here, at night, everything is understood without being said. Predation doesn't require a diagnosis. It just requires power. In some places, staff beat patients for sport. In others, they use them for labor, for pleasure, for cruelty, masked as treatment. And if something goes wrong, it's written off as psychosis, a hallucination, a paranoid outburst. There are no cameras, no inspections, only the word of the sane against the condemned. You sleep lightly, if at all. Every sound could mean a confrontation. Every footstep could stop at your bed. You try to make yourself invisible. Too quiet to engage. Too broken to be useful. It doesn't always work. You've seen the results. A man dragged back to bed with blood on his shirt. A girl whose hair is suddenly cut short. No explanation. A child who no longer speaks. You begin to understand that the worst part of this place isn't the abuse. It's that no one believes you, not even after you leave, if you ever leave. The asylum doesn't need guards. It has something more efficient, other patients. You learn quickly that the real danger isn't just from above. It's beside you, across from you, sometimes even in your own bed. Some people are here because they're violent. Others became violent after they arrived. And some are violent because it's the only way to avoid being preyed upon. There is no segregation, no real protection. You might sleep beside someone who murdered their family. You might be fed by someone who believes you're possessed. You might be watched every moment by someone who's simply waiting for a sign of weakness. It becomes a kind of jungle. Every patient finds a strategy. Some align themselves with staff, reporting gossip, acting as helpers, trading favors for better treatment. Others band together in silence, watching, warning, building fragile trust that could shatter at the first betrayal. You witness fights over food, over blankets, over nothing. And the staff don't always stop them. Sometimes they cheer. Sometimes they punish both sides. Because in their eyes, everyone is guilty of something. There are patients who fake fits to avoid work. Others who self-harm to get moved to quieter wards. Some claim visions or speak in tongues because it distracts from real pain. You start to forget who's pretending, and who's truly broken, and where the line even is anymore. But you do know this. There's no such thing as trust here. Only temporary alliances, because when survival is the only goal, even sanity becomes expendable. It doesn't happen all at once. No one wakes up insane. Not even here. It's slower, more deliberate. a kind of erosion. You watch it happen to others first. There's a man who used to hum quietly to himself during morning chores, off-key but gentle. Last week, they moved him to the silent ward for laughing at nothing. Now he doesn't hum. He stares at the wall for hours. There's a girl who asked to see her mother every morning. She used to cry when told no. Now she doesn't ask. She just rocks back and forth, biting her thumb until it bleeds. Another woman had a name, a voice, a history. Now she just repeats one word, please. This place has a way of unmaking people. It begins with the small things, forgetting what day it is, losing track of time, hearing noises that might not be real, but might be. Then come the bigger fractures. You forget how long you've been here. You forget if the people around you are real. You forget who you were. And once that starts, there's no treatment for it. Because here, forgetting is considered peaceful. The staff prefer silent patients. Still patients. Predictable ones. You hear them whisper it sometimes. She's quiet now. That's good. But you know what that really means. It means the system worked. It means the person is gone. And what's left is easier to manage. You start wondering if it will happen to you. You say your name at night before you sleep, just to remember. You try to recall your favorite color, the sound of your mother's voice, the smell of your home. Some days you can, some days you can't. And that's when you understand the final truth. In this place, madness isn't a condition. It's a destination. You've lost your name, your freedom, your story. Now, you lose your body. It doesn't happen through violence, at least not the kind that leaves bruises. It happens through procedures, through permission you never gave. The staff call it intervention. The records call it medical necessity. But what it really is control. You've heard whispers about it for weeks. Patients who disappear for a few days, then return changed, dull-eyed, slurred speech, a limp, a scar, a personality wiped clean. And one day, your name is called. You're escorted to the procedure room. You don't struggle. You've learned not to. You're told it's just a test, just an examination, just a routine check. It never is. You're laid on a table, strapped down. A nurse holds a rag against your mouth. The doctor mumbles something you don't hear. You feel the sting of metal, the sting of power. Sometimes it's bloodletting. Sometimes it's electrotherapy. Sometimes it's exploratory surgery. There are no second opinions, no consent forms, no one to advocate for you, no one to stop it. When it's over, you're weaker. Sometimes you bleed for days. Sometimes you lose speech. Sometimes you forget how to walk. And the staff call it progress. There's another patient, a man in his 30s, once defiant, loud, angry. He came back from surgery unable to speak. He drools now. One eye won't close all the way. He doesn't recognize you. He doesn't recognize himself. You hear the staff joke about it. Fixed him, didn't we? You understand now. You were never here to be cured. You were here to be owned, controlled, modified, and if necessary, destroyed. This is no longer about madness. It never was. This is about power. And you are just another body to shape. The world outside calls this the age of progress. Industrial revolutions, medical advancements, new machines, new theories, new ways to fix what once seemed unfixable. But inside the asylum, progress wears a darker face. You've heard the term moral management. It sounds gentle, enlightened. But in practice, it means the exact opposite. It means your behavior is the only symptom that matters. and your submission is the only cure. If you cry when you're told to be calm, you're sick. If you flinch when you're touched, you're unstable. If you resist, verbally, physically, emotionally, you are dangerous. And dangerous people are eligible for advanced treatment. The asylum has begun experimenting. They call it neurological recalibration. You call it what it is, torture. One method is the insulin coma. You're injected with massive doses of insulin, enough to drop your blood sugar to deadly levels. Within minutes, your body begins to seize. Your vision blurs. Your limbs convulse. Eventually, you slip into a coma. They revive you with sugar water, sometimes, if they're quick enough. And if you survive, they call it evidence of effectiveness. Because you're quiet now. Because you tremble when spoken to. Because you can no longer form coherent sentences. They call that healing. Another method is electroconvulsive therapy. Early models involve no anesthesia. You're strapped down, electrodes applied to your temples. A jolt, violent, uncontrollable, tears through your body. Your mouth foams. Your bladder empties. Your memory evaporates. You forget names. You forget pain. You forget everything. And they call it resetting. You meet a woman who had this done 3 times. Now she cannot remember her own daughter's face. She stares at her hands like they belong to someone else. You realize something unspoken. These aren't treatments. They are demonstrations of power. Because in a system that doesn't need to cure you, it only needs to remind you who's in control. Not every patient in this place screams. Some are too weak, some are too medicated, and some have been permanently silenced. Restraints are no longer just leather straps or camisoles. Now they're surgical, now they're final. You've heard the term surgical psychiatry. It's new, it's praised, it's funded, and it's terrifying. The newest cure being practiced is called the lobotomy. They don't call it that yet. They call it leucotomy, a procedure where parts of the brain are severed, removed, or destroyed, all in the name of reducing agitation. The method is crude. An orbitoclast, a long ice-pick-shaped tool, is inserted behind the eye socket, one sharp movement. Then another. The frontal lobe is scrambled. There's no anesthesia, just a mallet, no explanation, just an order. Afterward, patients are different. Some stare endlessly, some shuffle like ghosts, some forget how to speak, eat, even swallow. And yet the asylum considers it a triumph. Because now, these patients no longer fight, no longer resist, no longer suffer loudly. They just exist, in silence and in ruins. Another common method is dental extraction. Some doctors believed that madness was caused by hidden infections in the teeth and gums. So they pulled teeth. Dozens, sometimes all of them. You meet a man with no molars left. His meals are soaked in water so he can gum them down. He drools constantly and weeps at night. His chart says, condition improved, less aggressive. Others are sterilized, men and women alike. Not because they posed a danger, but because the state decided they were unfit to reproduce. This isn't medical care, it's eugenics, and it's legal. Families approve it, governments fund it, and doctors record it proudly. You understand now, fully. This institution is not a hospital, it is a machine, and every treatment is just another way to turn a living soul into something quiet, something manageable, something that will never ask to be free again. The body can be broken, the will can be bent, but to destroy the mind entirely, the asylum uses something quieter, solitary confinement. It doesn't look dangerous, a room, a door, a lock, that's all. No restraints, No beatings, no screaming, just absence, no light, no voices, no time. You're taken there once for talking back. The attendant says it's for your safety. But you see the look in his eyes. The cell is 6 feet by 6 feet, no window. A bucket in the corner, stone walls. The air is damp and sour. When the door closes, it feels like the air itself turns heavy. At first you pace, then you count, then you sing, softly, trying to hold on to something human. But eventually, you stop, because the darkness doesn't care, and no one answers. Some patients are left for days, others for weeks, and there are a few who never come back. You hear of one girl, 13 years old, kept in isolation for months after biting a nurse. When they brought her out, she no longer responded to her name. Her hands shook. Her eyes darted like a cornered animal's. She was transferred to a high-security ward the next day. No one saw her again. The asylum defends this method. They say it calms the nervous system, that it resets emotional disturbances, that it prevents harm. But what it really does is erase the self. The longer you stay alone, the more the mind folds in on itself. Memories blur, thoughts echo. You begin to hallucinate, to forget what voices sound like, to forget what light feels like. And by the time they let you out, if they do, you're not who you were. And that, in their view, is progress. Not everyone breaks quietly. There are those who fight, even in here, especially in here. And what they do, the asylum takes it personally. You witness your first rebellion one morning. A man refuses to take his food. He throws the bowl across the room. It's not much, just soup splattered on the wall. But in this place, it's an act of war. Within seconds, 2 attendants are on him. They wrestle him down. He screams. You see blood on the floor before he's dragged out. Later you learn where he went. The pit. Not its real name, of course, but that's what patients call it. A subterranean room, dark, wet. Without bedding, no food, except cold scraps. No warmth, except what your body can generate. Some are left there for days, some for longer. You hear of another patient, a woman who tried to escape. She managed to slip past the guards during laundry duty, made it all the way to the outer courtyard before they caught her. The staff didn't return her to her ward. They returned her to Ward 10. You've never seen it, only heard of it. Steel restraints, feeding tubes, no speech permitted. Patients who go there come back. Wrong, if they come back at all. Then there's the quiet resistance, the slow, hidden defiance, a smuggled piece of chalk, a message carved into a bed frame. I was sane. I was sane. A stash of food, a stolen page from a medical file, small rebellions, tiny victories, all crushed. The asylum always finds out. And when it does, the punishment isn't just physical. It's diagnostic. You're labeled paranoid, manipulative, delusional. And with that label, any complaint becomes another symptom, another reason to medicate, to restrain, to silence. You learn the most dangerous thing you can do in here is try to prove you're sane, because sanity is not something they measure, it's something they revoke. There are doors that only open one way, but some patients find their own exit. You're not supposed to talk about it, not in front of staff, not in front of the doctors, not even among yourselves. But everyone knows. Suicide isn't rare here, it's just ignored. There's the man who tied his sheets too tightly around his throat, the woman who hoarded pills under her tongue, the girl who stepped into the freezing lake behind the laundry house and never came back. The asylum never announces these deaths. They're recorded in ledgers, sanitized, rewritten. Patient expired during sleep. Heart failure. Choked on food. You find one of these obituaries taped to a hallway board. A name you remember. The woman who used to sing quietly to herself. Now replaced with a cold line of ink and a new admission form. They didn't even change the bed. And what's worse, sometimes patients don't die. Not all the way. You meet one woman who tried to hang herself in the lavatory. She was discovered too soon. Her voice never returned. She communicates now with gestures and vacant stares. The staff say she's improving. You know better. Some patients try and fail again, and each time the response is harsher. More restraints, more sedation, more surveillance. You realize something terrible. In here, the desire to die is treated not as a symptom, but as rebellion, because if you'd rather die than stay, you're seen as dangerous, not to yourself, but to the system that needs you silent. The asylum cannot allow escape, even in death. So they watch, they punish, they erase, but still, some succeed. And when they do, the halls are quieter, the beds reshuffled, the name forgotten. But you remember, because it could be you. It still might be. And in the darkest corners of your mind, you wonder if they were the only ones who truly got out. You've survived. You're still breathing, still eating, still walking the same worn corridors. But you're no longer whole. The asylum hasn't cured you. It's emptied you. What's left is a version of you that fits the institution's needs. Silent, docile, erased. You see it in others, too. There's a woman who used to speak of poetry, of gardens and letters. Now she mumbles nursery rhymes on a loop, folding the same piece of cloth again and again. There's a man who once led chapel services for the others. He now sits on the floor, tracing invisible shapes with his fingers, eyes glazed. You wonder, were they always like this? Or did the place make them that way? You already know the answer. Some of the longest tenured patients no longer remember where they came from. They cannot recall their families. They do not respond to their own names. They speak in fragments. They exist without meaning. And yet, they are considered success stories because they don't scream, they don't run, they don't resist. And in this place, peace is defined by absence. Your own reflection has changed. You barely recognize yourself. Your hair is thinner. Your skin is pale. You move more slowly. You speak more softly. You've stopped dreaming of outside, stopped counting the days, stopped believing in rescue. Not because it's impossible, but because the part of you that believed it was real is gone. You are a living ghost now, present in body, absent in mind, neutralized, and that, in the asylum's eyes, is the closest thing to a cure. It begins with a letter smuggled out, written in shaking hand, passed from one set of trembling fingers to another, until it reaches the outside. It doesn't say much, just names, dates, and one sentence written 3 times. They are killing us slowly. It reaches a journalist, a reformer, someone willing to look, someone not afraid to speak. Her name is Nellie Bly. She's young, persistent, unmarried, and tired of being told to write about fashion. So she makes a decision to go in. She feigns madness, enters Blackwell's Island Insane Asylum in New York. And what she finds shocks even her. The filth, the cruelty, the cold, the screams, the silence. 10 days she spends inside, 10 days as an inmate. And when she emerges, she brings the asylum's secrets with her. In her exposé, 10 days in a madhouse, she doesn't just write about the food or the chill. She writes about the despair, the way women are broken, not healed, the way sanity is ignored and madness manufactured. The public is horrified. Politicians scramble. Investigations begin, not just in New York, but across the country. Whispers of reform ripple outward. But the system doesn't collapse. Some hospitals change names. Some rules are rewritten. A few attendants are fired. A few buildings closed. But the buildings are reopened elsewhere, and the silence returns. Because for every Nellie Bly, there are 100 inmates with no voice, still locked away, still waiting to be seen, still whispering in the dark. Nellie Bly wasn't the first, and she wouldn't be the last, but her voice was among the few that got heard. Before her, there was Dorothea Dix, a schoolteacher who entered prisons and poorhouses, saw the mentally ill chained in basements, and decided the system needed to change. She traveled state to state, documenting the inhumane conditions. She testified before Congress. She convinced lawmakers to build better facilities, places where treatment might be possible. She helped establish over 30 hospitals. But even she knew bricks don't fix broken systems. Then came Clifford Beers, a Yale graduate who spent 3 years inside multiple institutions. He wasn't poor. He wasn't voiceless. He was simply ill, and he survived. When he got out, he wrote a book, A Mind That Found Itself. It exposed the cruelty, the neglect, the way intelligence and humanity are stripped the moment you're labeled insane. He founded the National Committee for Mental Hygiene. He wanted reform, not just for hospitals, but for society. He wanted people to understand that mental illness was not a crime. But for every reformer who spoke, a dozen more were silenced. Doctors who protested the treatments were pushed out. Nurses who filed reports were dismissed. Patients who tried to escape were punished or declared permanently incurable. The system protected itself, and every whistleblower faced a terrible irony. In a world that defines sanity by compliance, anyone who screams the truth can be labeled mad. Some were, some still are. The end didn't come with fire. It came with paperwork, reports, investigations, budgets. By the early 20th century, the asylum system was collapsing, not from within, but under the weight of its own contradictions, overcrowded, underfunded, impossible to manage. The public was told that asylums were humane alternatives to prisons, but when photos leaked of cages, chains, naked patients hunched in filth, that illusion shattered. One by one, the scandals broke. In Pennsylvania, in Massachusetts, in Illinois, each story worse than the last. Journalists snuck in with hidden cameras. Whistleblowers released letters. Former patients took the stand. And the world finally saw it. This wasn't care. This was containment, control, corruption. In 1946, a report called Asylums by sociologist Irving Goffman described institutions not as hospitals, but as totalitarian micro-societies, places where identity was stripped the moment you entered, where the rules existed only to maintain obedience. By the 1950s, new medications, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers promised an alternative. Outpatient care became the buzzword. Governments found it cheaper to close wards than to reform them, and so they did. Not all at once, but building by building, name by name. What was once the asylum era began to fade, but not because the world learned mercy, because it found a cheaper option. And the people once inside, many were released, with no homes, no families, no support. The asylum died, but the trauma it created did not. The asylums are mostly gone now, condemned, abandoned, turned into condos, or left to rot, overgrown and silent. but their ghosts remain, in records sealed by privacy laws, in burial plots marked with numbers instead of names, in family histories rewritten to erase shame. You might know someone who had a great-aunt sent away, or a grandfather who vanished for a few years. No one talks about where they went. But if you dig deep enough into census records, death certificates, medical files yellowed with age, you'll find them. Admitted for hysteria, for melancholy, for moral defect, for being inconvenient. They never came home. You might find photographs. Blurred black and white faces peering from barred windows. You won't know their names, but they were real. They lived. They suffered. They were forgotten. Even today, their legacy lingers. Modern psychiatric facilities may look different. Brighter lights, better medicine. But listen closely. Patients still speak of being ignored, misdiagnosed, over-medicated, restrained. Homeless shelters are filled with the mentally ill, cut loose by the very system that once promised protection. Prisons now house more psychiatric patients than hospitals. And the same questions remain. Who decides what is sane? Who gets to speak? Who gets believed? And who still gets locked away? The asylum may be gone, but its shadow stretches long. The asylum was supposed to be a place of healing. That's what the pamphlets said, what the doctors claimed, what the public believed, because they needed to. The reality was different. It wasn't a place where people were cured. It was a place where people were contained, erased, rewritten, filed away. And yet, even today, we romanticize the idea of the broken mind, restored. We love stories where trauma is overcome, where madness turns into genius, where a single doctor, a miracle drug, or a loving family brings someone back from the brink. But that wasn't the reality for most. Most didn't get better. They got quiet, not because they healed, but because the system made them small enough to manage. We look back now and call it barbaric. We shake our heads at the rotating chairs, the lobotomies, the bloodletting. But we rarely ask the harder questions. What replaced them? Who gets help today? Who still gets ignored? And what happened to the ones who never left? Some were buried behind the buildings, pine boxes, unmarked graves, forgotten by families, erased by time. Others lived long enough to see the doors close, but not long enough to be seen again. Their names are in ledgers, their stories are in dust, and their truths are still waiting to be heard. You were never meant to hear this story, not in school, not in history books, not from family members who may have once whispered a name and then changed the subject. Because this isn't a story people want to remember. It's one they were told to forget. But the walls remember, the floors, the ledgers, the empty graves behind the gardens. They all remember. You've walked the halls now, heard the screams, felt the straps, sat in the cold, silent dark, wondering if anyone will ever believe you. And now, finally, you're free. But here's the truth. The asylum never needed bars to hold you. It only needed silence, shame, and a world willing to look the other way. That part hasn't changed. So ask yourself, if you had lived back then, with grief too deep to explain, or thoughts that wouldn't quiet, or emotions that didn't fit the mold, would you have survived? Would you have been believed, or diagnosed, locked away, forgotten? You know the answer. This story isn't ancient. It's recent. It's real. And for far too many, it never truly ended.